The man behind the garage door, he fixed the buses no one cared about. Then one morning, the mayor's car broke down, and guess who they called? The garage was quiet at 6:15 a.m., just the hum of the vending machine and the buzz of old fluorescent lights flickering to life. Frank Delaney rolled up the side door like he always did. Slow, steady, one hand on the handle, the other holding a chipped coffee mug. The shop on 8th and Lincoln wasn't fancy. No corporate signage, no glass-walled customer lounge. Just two bays, a tool wall, and a scarred wooden bench where folks waited, sometimes just to talk. It had been 6 months since he left the city depot. 6 months since he packed up his toolbox and said goodbye to the job he'd done for 28 years without ever missing a winter. Now he worked here, quietly, no uniforms, no supervisors, just folks who brought him engines that rattled and belts that squealed and trusted him to make them right again. He didn't advertise, didn't need to. The regulars called it Frank's Place, though the sign still read Lincoln Tire and Lube. And every morning, like clockwork, he was there before the sun, fixing what others gave up on, saying little, but always listening. He never asked for much. And yet, on that particular Tuesday morning, something unusual happened. A black SUV with government plates pulled up to the curb and stayed idling. Frank set down his mug. He hadn't seen that kind of car since, well, not since the day they told him he was no longer needed. And just like that, the quiet shift was over. Frank Delaney wasn't the kind of man people noticed at first. He didn't talk much, didn't rush, and wore the same gray work jacket year-round. Patches on both elbows, a faded name tag stitched crooked over the chest. He was 61, broad-shouldered, slow-moving, with hands that had more miles on them than most of the buses he fixed. For nearly 3 decades, he'd worked for the city transit yard, Bay 4, nights and early mornings, rain or snow. While most of the city slept, Frank kept the engines running. He didn't have a degree, barely finished high school, in fact. His dad had worked the railroad, his mom cleaned houses, and Frank had started wrenching on lawnmowers before he was old enough to drive. By 18, he was under a city bus with a socket wrench and no plans to go anywhere else. He was good at what he did. Not fast, not flashy, just right. The kind of mechanic who could hear a knock in the engine and know if it was timing, tension, or just the cold. Supervisors came and went. Budgets shrank, tools wore down, politics made the job harder. But Frank stayed. Stayed through the strikes, through the winter where heaters failed and they worked in gloves. Through the year he lost his wife, June, and came back the next day because the schedule needed him. He didn't complain, didn't brag. If someone was short on lunch, he'd share his sandwich. If a rookie stripped a bolt, Frank would quietly hand them the right tool and show them how to ease it loose. The guys in the yard said he had grease in his blood, but it wasn't that. It was something quieter, a sense of duty, of fixing things, even when no one said thank you. For a long time that was enough, until it wasn't. The last Frank's mornings followed a rhythm no schedule required. Coffee at 5:45, lights on at 6, wrench in hand by 6:05. He didn't need a clock. His bones told him when to start. The shop wasn't big. 2 lifts, 1 wall of tools, and a steel cabinet with drawers that stuck if you didn't pull them just right. Outside, the same chain-link fence with the padlock that never quite clicked shut. Inside, everything was where Frank left it. Old oil-stained rags folded on the bench. A photo of June tucked in the corner behind a row of fuses. He didn't advertise, but people came. Word spread, not because of price, but because Frank listened. He didn't just fix engines, he fixed nerves. That Tuesday, a woman showed up with a school van. Brakes squealing, wipers shot, heater broken. "We've got a field trip Thursday," she said. "If you can't get it running, we'll have to cancel." Frank didn't ask for payment up front, just nodded and wrote her name on the whiteboard. No clipboard, no intake form, just trust. By noon, he had the wheels off and the drums cleaned. At 2, he pulled the dash apart to get at the old heater core. At 4, he'd found a replacement in a junkyard catalog, drove across town, and brought it back himself. He worked past closing, didn't say why. The next morning, the van was ready. Full tank, heat blowing strong, new wipers. She asked how much. He just waved a hand. Kids need the trip more than I need the money, he said. That was Frank. He fixed things quietly, and people remembered. Order. Before the shop on 8th and Lincoln, Frank had worked at the city's main transit depot, Bay 4, North Wing. That's where the change began. It started quietly. The kind of change that didn't make noise but moved like cold air through a cracked window. City Hall hired a new director for fleet maintenance. Young, clean shoes, shiny watch, business cards with gold trim. Name was Carson Whitmore, MBA, not a wrench turner. He toured the yard like it was a showroom, asked about efficiency metrics and output velocity. The first thing to go was overtime, then tool stipends. Then came the tablets. Mechanics now had to log every job, every part, every minute. Frank still preferred paper and pen. Said he trusted ink more than Wi-Fi. Whitmore called a meeting, said they'd be modernizing operations, faster turnarounds, digital diagnostics, flat rate service times. Mechanics were told to speed up, 35 minutes per brake job, or flag it. Frank just listened, arms crossed, brow furrowed. He'd been through policy shifts before, but this one felt different. He started getting notes on his log sheets. Too slow. Out of compliance. Re-inspect. Job took 2 times estimated time. He didn't argue, just kept working. One job at a time, safely, thoroughly. One morning he spent 3 extra hours fixing a steering column on a school bus. It had a rattle no one else noticed. Frank did. He stayed late, replaced the worn bearing, didn't bill for it. Next day, Whitmore pulled him aside. "You're not keeping pace," he said. "This isn't the old days, Frank. We need techs who move." Frank looked at him. "Then you don't need me," he said simply. No drama, no speech. He hung up his jacket that evening, took down June's photo, packed his tools, and walked away. It wasn't one big moment that pushed Frank out. It was a quiet Thursday in February. Bay 4 was cold that morning. Radiators hadn't kicked in. Frank wore his flannel under the work jacket, moved slower than usual. Knees stiff, hands a little shaky from the cold. The job was Bus 117, scheduled for brake replacement. Simple, routine. But when Frank pulled the wheels, he saw the rotors were glazed and thin. He checked the log. Same parts had been replaced just 3 weeks earlier. That didn't sit right. He went to the parts room, pulled the invoice, checked the numbers. Someone had checked the box but hadn't done the work. Maybe they were rushed. Maybe they needed to meet the quota. Maybe they didn't care. But Frank did. He flagged the job, filled out a defect report, and told the shift supervisor the truth. Quietly, no accusation, just facts. By noon, Whitmore called him into the office. "We've had enough of this," the director said. "You're slow. You question procedures, and now you're accusing your team?" Frank didn't answer right away. Just looked at the screen behind Whitmore's shoulder. A spreadsheet filled with columns, no names, just numbers. Throughput, labor cost, time per job. He set the report on the desk. "This bus carries kids to Roosevelt Elementary," he said. "That rotor fails. Somebody doesn't go home." Whitmore scoffed. "You mechanics think you're the soul of the place. You're a wrench, Frank, nothing more." That was it. Not the quotas, not the software, not even the missing parts. It was being told he didn't matter. That night, Frank cleaned out Bay 4, took his tools, took his name tag, left the safety gloves on the hook. Someone else might need them. He didn't ask for a farewell. He didn't want one. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It just packs up quietly and goes. Bay 4 didn't sit empty for long. The next week, a younger guy named Miguel took Frank's spot. Fast hands, sharp tablet skills, knew all the diagnostics. But something was missing. Within days, Bus 117 came back, brakes still squealing. A city shuttle stalled in mid-route when a sensor was miswired. Complaints began to trickle in, then pile up. Supervisors started calling in retired techs to help troubleshoot the legacy issues. No one used Frank's name, but his absence echoed in every late-night dispatch. At the depot, they covered his nameplate with a printed label. The locker stayed locked. Some said they'd heard he was still fixing cars. out near Lincoln, and he was. The day after he left, Frank drove across town, stopped at an old tire shop with a flickering neon sign. Lincoln Tire and Lube. It had been for sale. Not much, but enough for one man with a pension, a toolbox, and nowhere else to be. He didn't change much, just cleared out space, cleaned the bay, painted the cabinets, hung June's photo by the back window, put up a small hand-lettered sign, "Open if you need me." At first, just neighbors stopped in, then a school janitor, a retired mailman, a mom with a sputtering minivan, and 3 booster seats in the back. They didn't come for the price. They came for the way Frank looked at an engine, and then looked at them. He worked slow, talked less. But when he handed back the keys, people left lighter. He didn't chase anything. Not revenge, not redemption. Just truth, one bolt at a time. And somehow that was enough. Until one day, a black SUV with city plates stopped outside. The SUV idled at the curb for nearly 2 minutes before anyone stepped out. Frank was under an old Dodge Caravan, tightening a loose exhaust bracket. He saw the shoes first. Polished leather, too clean for this part of town. Then the man, tall, neat haircut, city-issued windbreaker, deputy director of fleet services, if Frank remembered right. Behind him stood a younger assistant holding a folder like a shield. "Mr. Delaney?" the official asked, unsure if he should step inside. Frank didn't answer right away. Just wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the workbench. He looked older than they remembered, but not weaker, just still. "We'd like to talk," the man said. "Off the record." They sat on folding chairs. Frank didn't offer coffee. The deputy spoke first, talked about the complaints, the delays, the gap in institutional knowledge, talked about morale, about rising costs, about how after Frank left, things hadn't just slowed down, they'd started to fall apart. Then he opened the folder. "We want to offer you something," he said. "Not a job. A roll inside were papers, proposal drafts, budget allocations, a memo with the words Community Maintenance Initiative. You'd oversee quality standards," he explained. "Mentor younger techs, rebuild the training program. No quotas, just the right way." Frank said nothing for a long moment, then looked out the garage door, where a mother waited with a child in the passenger seat, the kind who couldn't afford 2 trips to fix the same thing. "Why now?" Frank finally asked. The deputy didn't dodge it. "Because we thought numbers were enough," he said. "But turns out people remember the man who didn't rush." That night, Frank didn't sleep much. He sat in the back room, fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug, June's photo beside him. He didn't want a title. He didn't care about policy. But if someone was finally willing to fix the system, not patch it, but really fix it, maybe that was worth showing up for. 1 year later, the city opened its first hands-on maintenance training center on the east side, in the old depot warehouse Frank once worked in. The plaque near the entrance read, "The Delaney Center for Honest Work." In recognition of those who fix things the right way, even when no one's watching. Frank didn't ask for that. He never even went to the ribbon cutting. He was back on 8th and Lincoln most days, still turning wrenches, still listening to the hum of old engines like they were speaking in code only he could hear. But once a week, he'd stop by the new center, walk through the rows of young techs in Navy coveralls, and answer questions nobody else had time for. He didn't talk about the past much, didn't need to. The ones who worked beside him felt it, in the way he checked a bolt twice or paused before signing off a repair, in the way he'd say, "Do it right," or "Don't do it at all." They started calling him Mr. Frank, not because he asked, but because he earned it. And when city officials dropped by for inspections or news crews came looking for a story, he always stayed in the back, wiping down tools, sleeves rolled up. He wasn't looking for applause, he just wanted things to run right. And these days they did. Sometimes the quietest man in the room leaves the loudest legacy.